I apologized to my neighbor for my dog digging up his garden. He put down the shovel he was holding, wiped his forehead, and said, "That wasn't my garden. That was where I buried $3 million in cash." When Robert Kellerman said those words, standing in the hole my golden retriever had excavated in his backyard, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my brain couldn't process what I'd just heard. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across his yard, and there was dirt on his white undershirt, and he was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something between panic and resignation. My dog, Bailey, a 2-year-old golden retriever with more enthusiasm than sense, sat beside me wagging her tail, completely oblivious to the fact that she'd just unearthed what might be the biggest problem of my life. My name is Alex Hartley. I'm 34 years old, a software engineer for a cybersecurity firm in Portland, Oregon. I work from home most days, which is why I'd adopted Bailey 6 months earlier. Company, exercise, a reason to take breaks from staring at code. I'd moved into the Westridge neighborhood in North Portland about 8 months ago. Quiet street, older homes with big yards, the kind of place where people actually knew their neighbors' names. Robert Kellerman lived in the house directly behind mine. Our backyards shared a fence line. He was maybe 60, retired, lived alone. Quiet guy. We'd exchanged pleasantries over the fence a few times. He seemed normal, boring even, the kind of neighbor you forget about. That Friday afternoon in late September, I'd been working on a security audit when I heard Bailey barking in the backyard. Not her usual playful bark, but something more intense. I'd gone outside to find a section of Kellerman's wooden fence had a loose board, and Bailey had squeezed through. She was in his yard, digging furiously near what looked like a vegetable garden. Tomato plants, some lettuce, stakes with string between them. I'd called her name, but she was in that zone dogs get into when they've found something interesting. By the time I'd squeezed through the fence gap myself, she'd dug a hole about 2 feet deep and 3 feet wide. Dirt everywhere, plants uprooted. I'd felt that sinking feeling you get when your dog destroys something that isn't yours. Then Kellerman had appeared from his back door, moving faster than I'd ever seen him move. He was carrying a shovel, and for one bizarre moment, I'd wondered if he was going to hit me with it. But he'd just stopped at the edge of the hole, looking down into it with an expression I couldn't decipher. That's when I'd started apologizing, profusely, offering to fix everything, replant whatever Bailey had destroyed, pay for any damage. I was mortified. That's when he'd said it, the thing about $3 million in cash. I'd laughed because I thought he was making a joke, some kind of dry humor about how valuable his vegetable garden was to him. But he wasn't laughing. He wasn't smiling. He was staring into that hole like it was a grave. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say, my laugh dying in my throat. Kellerman looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach clench. Fear. Deep, genuine fear. "You need to take your dog and go back to your house," he said quietly. "Right now. And we need to forget this happened." I just stood there, confused. Bailey chose that moment to jump back into the hole, tail wagging, and started digging again. I grabbed her collar, pulled her out. That's when I saw it. At the bottom of the hole, partially uncovered, was a black plastic sheet. Heavy-duty, like contractor's plastic. And underneath it, I could see the edge of something. Multiple somethings. Rectangular shapes wrapped in clear plastic. My brain finally caught up. I looked at Kellerman. He looked at me. "Please," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. "Just go." I should have listened. I should have taken Bailey, gone back through that fence gap, fixed the board, and pretended this never happened. Instead, I heard myself say, "Is that actually money?" Kellerman closed his eyes, took a deep breath. When he opened them again, something had changed. The fear was still there, but now there was calculation too. "How much did you see?" he asked. "Just the edge of something. I don't know what it is." That was a lie. I knew exactly what it looked like. I'd seen enough crime dramas to recognize stacks of cash wrapped in plastic when I saw them. Kellerman nodded slowly. Okay. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your dog home. You're going to fix that fence board. And you're never going to mention this to anyone. Not your wife, not your friends, not the police, no one." I didn't have a wife, but I didn't correct him. "And if I do mention it?" I asked. The question came out before I could stop it. Something in his expression hardened. "Then both of us have a very big problem," he said. "Because that money, it's not mine. And the people it belongs to, they're not the kind of people you want knowing your name." He paused. "Or where you live. Or that you have a dog you clearly care about." The threat was delivered calmly, almost conversationally, but it landed like a punch. I felt my mouth go dry. Bailey whined, sensing my tension. "I understand," I said quietly. "Good. Now go." I went. Pulled Bailey back through the fence gap, took her inside, gave her a bath because she was covered in dirt. My hands were shaking the entire time. I kept telling myself this was insane, that my boring, retired neighbor couldn't possibly have $3 million buried in his backyard, that he definitely hadn't just threatened my dog, that I was overreacting. But I'd seen his face. I'd heard his voice. and I'd seen enough of what was in that hole to know he wasn't making it up. I spent the rest of that evening in a weird state of paralysis. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, not actually working. My mind kept cycling through what I'd seen, what Kellerman had said. $3 million. Not his money. People who weren't the kind you want knowing your name. What did that mean? Mob money? Drug money? Stolen money? And why was it buried in a backyard in a quiet Portland neighborhood? I pulled up Google, started searching for Robert Kellerman Portland. Nothing interesting came up. A few social media profiles that might or might not be him. No criminal records that I could find, though I didn't have access to the deeper databases I used for work. Should I call the police? And tell them what? That my neighbor had buried money in his yard? What if he was lying? What if it wasn't actually money? I'd look like an idiot, but I'd seen those rectangular shapes. I'd seen the plastic wrapping. That was money. Had to be. And Kellerman's reaction hadn't been the reaction of someone making a joke or telling a tall tale. That had been genuine panic. And the threat. The veiled threat about Bailey, about knowing where I lived. That had been real too. I found myself looking out my back window, down at Kellerman's yard. I couldn't see the hole from this angle, but I could see lights on in his house. Was he out there right now, reburying everything? Moving it somewhere else? Or was he inside making phone calls to whoever they were, the people the money belonged to? I pulled the blinds closed and locked the back door, feeling paranoid and ridiculous. Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of construction. I looked out my bedroom window and saw Kellerman in his backyard with what looked like fresh sod, covering the area where the hole had been. He worked quickly, methodically, and within 2 hours, you couldn't tell anything had been disturbed. The vegetable garden was gone, replaced by a neat square of new grass that didn't quite match the rest of his lawn. He saw me watching from my window and held my gaze for a long moment before going back inside. The message was clear. This never happened. I spent the rest of the weekend trying to act normal. Took Bailey for long walks, went to the grocery store, watched a movie. But my mind kept drifting back to that hole, that plastic, those rectangular shapes. $3 million. Monday morning, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I used my work credentials to run a deeper background check on Robert Kellerman. Technically, this was a violation of company policy. We were only supposed to use our database access for legitimate security work. But I justified it by telling myself this was a security issue. My security. What I found made my blood run cold. Robert Kellerman, age 62, had a criminal record. Nothing recent, everything was from 25 to 30 years ago, but it was extensive. Armed robbery in 1994, assault in 1996, possession with intent to distribute in 1998. He'd served time, gotten out, went clean. Or appeared to go clean. No arrests since 2002. But his known associates list was a who's who of Portland organized crime from the 90s. Names I vaguely recognized from news articles about mob busts and drug operations. One name in particular jumped out. Vincent Albrecht, currently serving 25 to life in federal prison for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Arrested in 2019 after a massive FBI investigation, and according to the case files I could access, approximately $3.2 million from Albrecht's operation was never recovered. The FBI had assumed it was hidden offshore or laundered through legitimate businesses. They'd never found it. My hands were actually shaking as I read this. The timeline made sense. Albrecht goes down in 2019. Kellerman, former associate, would have known the FBI was closing in. He would have known they'd be looking for the money. So he takes it, buries it in his backyard, and waits. Waits for the heat to die down. Waits for everyone to forget. And then my dog digs it up. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This was mob money, federal case money, evidence in an ongoing investigation, and I'd stumbled into the middle of it because my dog liked to dig. What was I supposed to do with this information? If I went to the police, Kellerman would know it was me. His threat about people knowing my name suddenly felt a lot more concrete. These weren't hypothetical dangerous people. These were actual organized crime figures. Some in prison, sure, but organized crime doesn't stop just because the boss is locked up. There would be people on the outside, people who'd want that money back, people who wouldn't be happy to learn someone had informed on them. But if I didn't go to the police, I was essentially an accessory. I knew about a major crime and was actively hiding it. That came with its own legal problems. I decided to sit on it, just for a few days. Think it through. Maybe nothing would happen. Maybe Kellerman would just keep the money buried, and I could pretend I'd never seen anything. That lasted exactly 36 hours. Wednesday evening, I came home from a rare in-office day to find Bailey acting strange. She was cowering in the corner of the living room, tail between her legs, whimpering. That wasn't like her at all. I checked her over, couldn't find any injuries, but she was clearly terrified of something. Then I noticed the back door. It was unlocked. I always locked it. Always. I kept a spare key under a fake rock by the front door, but no one knew about that except me. Or so I thought. I walked through my house, heart pounding. Nothing seemed disturbed, nothing missing, but someone had been here. I could feel it. I found the proof in my bedroom. My laptop, which I'd left closed on my desk, was open. The screen was dark, but when I moved the mouse, it woke up to my login screen. Someone had tried to access it. I checked the security camera footage from my home system. I had cameras on the front door and back door, basic security that came with the smart doorbell I'd installed. The back door footage showed a man I didn't recognize entering my house at 2:17 p.m. He was in his 40s, wearing a black jacket and jeans. He'd used a key, my spare key. He'd been inside for 18 minutes. The camera caught him leaving, and just before he exited, he'd looked directly at the camera and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a message. They were watching me. They knew where I lived. They could get in whenever they wanted. I checked on Bailey again. She was still cowering, but she came to me when I called her. I held her, felt her trembling, and something inside me snapped. These people had come into my home. They'd terrified my dog. They were trying to intimidate me into silence, and it was working. I was terrified, but I was also angry enough to do something stupid. I called the Portland Police non-emergency line, told them I wanted to report a break-in. They sent an officer, Jeremy Thompson, about 10 years on the force, looked tired and overworked. He took my statement, looked at the camera footage, wrote everything down in his notebook. "Any idea who this person is?" he asked. "No," I lied. I had a pretty good idea. Someone connected to Kellerman. Someone who wanted to make sure I kept my mouth shut. "Anything stolen?" Officer Thompson asked. "Not that I can tell." "Any damage?" "No." He nodded, still writing. "I'll file a report. You should change your locks, obviously, and maybe upgrade your security system. The camera footage is good, but if they got in once, they can get in again." I thanked him, and he left. I knew that report would go nowhere. A break-in with no theft, no damage, no clear suspect. It would sit in a file somewhere, and nothing would happen. But I'd created a paper trail, documentation that someone had violated my space. It was something. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with Bailey, lights on, checking the camera feeds on my phone every few minutes. Nothing happened, but the message had been sent. Stay quiet. Don't talk. Forget what you saw. Thursday morning, I made a decision. I needed help from someone who actually understood this kind of situation. I couldn't go to the police without more proof, more protection. So I called the FBI, the Portland field office, told the receptionist I had information about the Vincent Albrecht case. That got me transferred. And transferred again. Eventually, I ended up on the phone with Special Agent Thomas Reinhardt, 15 years with the Bureau, specialized in organized crime. "Mr. Hartley," he said, his voice professional but cautious. "You said you have information about the Albrecht case?" I took a deep breath. "I think I know where $3 million of his money is." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm going to need you to come to the office. Today, if possible. Don't discuss this with anyone else." I met Agent Reinhardt at the FBI field office in downtown Portland at 2 p.m. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, sharp suit, sharp eyes. He brought me into an interview room, recorded everything I said. I told him the whole story. The dog, the hole, the buried money, Kellerman's threat, the background I'd uncovered, the break-in. Reinhardt listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, he sat back in his chair. "Mr. Hartley, this is a significant allegation," he said carefully. "I need you to understand the implications of what you're telling me. If what you're saying is true, Robert Kellerman is in possession of federal evidence, money that was proceeds from criminal enterprise. We've been looking for that money for 5 years." "I know," I said. "I looked up the case." Reinhardt nodded. "And you understand that coming forward with this information puts you in a difficult position. If Kellerman or his associates learn that you've contacted us, they may see you as a threat." "They already see me as a threat," I said, and showed him the footage of the break-in. "Someone came into my house 2 days ago. They didn't steal anything. They were sending a message." Reinhardt watched the footage, his expression hardening. "Did you report this?" "Yes, to Portland PD. Officer Thompson took a report." "Good, that's good." He paused. "Mr. Hartley, I'm going to be direct with you. If we move on this, if we get a warrant for Kellerman's property and find that money, you will likely need to testify. Your identity will be part of the court record. These people will know it was you." I'd already thought about this. "I understand. We can offer you some protections. We can coordinate with local PD to increase patrols in your area. We can help you relocate if necessary. But I want you to understand the reality. This is a dangerous situation." "I know," I said. "But I can't just pretend I didn't see anything. They've already threatened me. They've already broken into my home. If I do nothing, I'm still a target. At least this way, Kellerman goes to prison and the money gets recovered." Reinhardt studied me for a long moment. "All right, I'm going to need you to sign some statements, and I'm going to need you to stay available. We'll need to verify your claims, get a warrant, plan the operation. This won't happen overnight." "How long?" "A week, maybe 2. We need to do this right." I left the FBI office feeling both relieved and more anxious than before. I'd set something in motion that I couldn't take back. That evening, Kellerman was in his backyard when I got home. He was watering his lawn, including the new sod. He saw me pull into my driveway and gave a friendly wave. Like everything was normal. Like he hadn't threatened me. Like his associate hadn't broken into my house. I waved back, playing along. The game we were both playing now. But my hand was shaking. Friday, Saturday, Sunday passed in a weird state of hypervigilance. I barely left my house, had groceries delivered, took Bailey for walks only in the middle of the day when there were other people around. I upgraded my security system, added cameras to the side of the house, got smart locks for all the doors. I was turning my home into a fortress. Monday morning, Agent Reinhardt called. "We have the warrant," he said. "We're executing it tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I need you to not be home. Can you arrange that?" "Yes," I said. "Where should I go?" "Anywhere public. A coffee shop, a library, somewhere with cameras and people. Take your dog with you. Don't tell anyone where you're going. And keep your phone on." "Okay." "Mr. Hartley, I want you to understand that once this happens, things are going to move fast. Kellerman will be arrested. The money will be recovered and processed as evidence. There will be media attention. Your name will come out eventually. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. Was I prepared for my life to change? For people to know I was the person who'd found $3 million in mob money? For whatever consequences that might bring? "Yes," I said. "I'm prepared." That night, I packed a bag. Clothes, laptop, Bailey's food and toys. I barely slept. At 4:30 a.m., my alarm went off. I got up, got Bailey ready, loaded everything into my car. I drove to a 24-hour diner on the east side of Portland, far from my neighborhood. Ordered coffee and breakfast I couldn't eat. Bailey sat under the table, sensing my tension. At exactly 6:04 a.m., my phone buzzed. Text from Agent Reinhardt. "Operation underway." I stared at my phone, imagining what was happening. FBI agents in tactical gear surrounding Kellerman's house. The knock on the door. The warrant. The search. The excavation of his backyard. The recovery of $3 million in cash. Kellerman's arrest. The look on his face when he realized I'd talked. Another text at 6:39. "Subject in custody. Evidence recovered. Stay where you are." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It was done. An hour later, Agent Reinhardt called. "We got it," he said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. $3.1 million in cash, exactly as you described. Wrapped in plastic, buried approximately 3 feet down. Kellerman is in custody. We're processing the scene now. "What happens next?" I asked. "We'll hold him pending charges. Federal charges for possession of stolen property, obstruction of justice, possibly more depending on what else we find. He'll have a bail hearing, but I doubt he'll make bail. The money is evidence. It'll be logged, counted, tested. Some of it will go back to Albrecht's victims through the restitution process. And me? You'll need to come in and give a formal statement. And yes, you'll eventually be called as a witness when this goes to trial. But Mr. Hartley, you did the right thing. This money was stolen from legitimate businesses. There are victims who never got restitution because we couldn't find the assets. You helped fix that." I hung up feeling strange, relieved, but also anxious, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I stayed at the diner for another 2 hours, then drove to a hotel, checked in under my name because hiding seemed pointless now. The news broke that afternoon. FBI recovers millions in organized crime case. The story was all over local media. They didn't name Kellerman at first, just called him a Portland resident. They didn't name me at all, but I knew it was only a matter of time. I was right. By Thursday, my name was in the court documents, which were public record. Alex Hartley, witness for the prosecution. By Friday, a reporter from the Oregonian had called my cell phone. I didn't answer. They left a voicemail asking for an interview. The public wants to know how an ordinary citizen stumbled onto $3 million in mob money. I deleted it. But more calls came. Local news stations, true crime podcasters. Everyone wanted the story. Agent Reinhardt had warned me this would happen. "You don't have to talk to anyone," he'd said. "In fact, I'd recommend you don't until after the trial." I followed his advice. Didn't answer calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Didn't check my social media. Just stayed at the hotel with Bailey and waited. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Kellerman's lawyer tried to get the evidence suppressed, arguing the warrant was based on an unreliable tip, that I was a civilian with no law enforcement training who couldn't possibly have known what I'd seen. The judge disagreed. The warrant was solid. The evidence was admissible. Kellerman was denied bail. Too much flight risk, the prosecutor argued. Extensive criminal history, connections to organized crime, access to significant cash assets. The judge agreed. Kellerman would stay in custody pending trial. I watched the hearing via video link from the FBI office. Saw Kellerman in his orange jumpsuit, looking smaller somehow, diminished. He didn't look at the camera, didn't acknowledge me in any way, but his lawyer did. After the hearing ended, she spoke to the press outside the courthouse. "My client maintains his innocence. The money in question was found on his property, but that doesn't prove he put it there. This could be a case of someone planting evidence. We intend to prove that at trial." It was a weak defense, and everyone knew it. But she had to say something. The media ate it up anyway. The story had everything they wanted. Hidden mob money, an ordinary guy and his dog stumbling into a federal case, a retired criminal caught after years of hiding. It was perfect for ratings. I just wanted it to be over. Agent Reinhardt called me in late October. "I have an update," he said. "Kellerman's talking." "What do you mean?" "He's negotiating a plea deal. His lawyer reached out to the prosecutor. He's willing to provide information about Vincent Albrecht's organization in exchange for a reduced sentence. What kind of information? Names, operations, other hidden assets. The Albrecht case was huge, but we always knew we didn't get everyone. Kellerman was there for a lot of it. He can fill in gaps. So what does that mean for the trial? I asked. Probably that there won't be one. If he pleads guilty and cooperates, we'll recommend a lighter sentence. Maybe 8 to 10 years instead of 20 to life. He'd still do time, but he'd have a chance of getting out. I didn't know how to feel about that. On one hand, justice meant Kellerman going to prison. On the other hand, 8 years seemed light for stealing $3 million. What about the break-in? I asked. The person who came into my house? Kellerman claims he didn't order that. Says it was someone from the old organization who found out about the money and wanted to scare you into silence. He gave us a name. We're looking into it. Is that person a threat to me? Honestly, probably not. Not anymore. With Kellerman in custody and the money recovered, there's no reason for anyone to come after you. The money's gone. It's evidence now. Can't be touched. That was supposed to be reassuring. It wasn't. But I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe my life could go back to normal. In November, Kellerman formally pleaded guilty. 1 count of possession of stolen property. 1 count of obstruction of justice. In exchange, he provided detailed information about Albrecht's money laundering operations, leading to 3 additional arrests of people still operating in Portland. The prosecutor called it a significant victory for law enforcement. At his sentencing hearing in December, Kellerman got 9 years in federal prison. With good behavior, he'd be out in 7. The judge noted his cooperation, but also emphasized the seriousness of his crimes. You stole millions of dollars and hid it for 5 years, the judge said. You obstructed a federal investigation. You threatened an innocent civilian. Prison is appropriate. I watched that hearing too, via video link. This time, Kellerman did look at the camera. Just for a second. I couldn't read his expression. Regret? Anger? Resignation? Maybe all 3. The money was divided according to federal asset forfeiture laws. A portion went to the victims of Albrecht's crimes, distributed through the court-ordered restitution process. Another portion went to the federal government, reimbursing them for the cost of the investigation. And a small portion, about $60,000, went to me. Reward money for providing information leading to the recovery of stolen assets. I hadn't expected it. Agent Reinhardt called to tell me the check was being processed. You earned it, he said. Federal law provides for rewards in cases like this. You took a risk coming forward. You could have walked away, pretended you saw nothing. Instead, you did the right thing. I used the money to move. Got a new house in a different neighborhood in Southeast Portland. Somewhere nobody knew me or my story. Updated Bailey's microchip information. Started fresh. The news coverage eventually died down. There were bigger stories, newer scandals. By January, my name was mostly forgotten. Occasionally, I'd get recognized. Someone at a coffee shop or the grocery store would look at me funny, like they knew me from somewhere but couldn't place it. I learned to ignore it, learned to keep my head down. Agent Reinhardt checked in periodically, making sure I was okay. Any issues? He'd ask. Anyone contact you? The answer was always no. Whoever had broken into my house that day in September never came back. Kellerman was in federal prison in California, doing his time. The people he'd given up were arrested or had disappeared. The organization had moved on. I was irrelevant now. That was fine with me. Irrelevant was safe. Irrelevant meant I could rebuild my life without looking over my shoulder constantly. In February, I got a letter. It came to my new address, which was concerning in itself because I hadn't given that address to anyone except the FBI and my employer. The envelope was plain, no return address, postmarked from Sacramento, California, near the federal prison where Kellerman was housed. I almost didn't open it, almost threw it away. But curiosity won. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in neat cursive. Mr. Hartley, I owe you an apology. What I did was wrong. Threatening you, having someone break into your home, trying to intimidate you into silence. You were just a civilian caught in a situation you didn't ask for. You did what anyone with integrity would do. I spent 5 years thinking I could outrun my past. All I did was postpone the inevitable. Prison is hard, but it's honest. For the first time in decades, I'm not hiding. Not running, not lying. I'm paying for what I did. That's as it should be. I hope you found peace. I hope your dog is well. I'm genuinely sorry for the fear I caused you. Sincerely, Robert Kellerman. I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't know what to feel. Anger that he'd had someone get my new address, even from prison. Suspicion that this was some kind of manipulation. But also something else. Something like closure. I called Agent Reinhardt, told him about the letter. Is this allowed? I asked. Can he contact me from prison? Technically, inmates can send mail to whoever they want, unless there's a specific court order preventing contact. There isn't one in this case. Is the letter threatening? No, it's an apology. Do you want to file a complaint? I thought about it. No, I just wanted you to know about it. Okay, if he contacts you again, let me know. But if this is genuinely just him apologizing, that's actually a good sign. Means he's accepted responsibility. I kept the letter. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it was proof that sometimes people actually face consequences for their actions, that the system, flawed as it is, can work. Or maybe because it reminded me that I'd done something hard and necessary, even when I was terrified. Life moved on. Bailey turned 3 in March. I took her to the dog park, watched her play with other dogs, and felt grateful she'd moved past whatever trauma the break-in had caused her. She was back to her normal, happy, enthusiastic self. My work continued. I got promoted to senior security analyst, which came with a raise and more responsibility. I dated occasionally, though I never told anyone about the Kellerman situation on the first date. That was a third-date conversation at earliest. Most people thought it was an amazing story. A few thought it was terrifying. Both reactions were valid. In May, I got another call from Agent Reinhardt. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. "The person who broke into your house last September. We identified him from the camera footage you provided. His name is Leonard Nash. He was arrested in Arizona on unrelated charges. During questioning, he admitted to the break-in. Said Kellerman paid him $5,000 to scare you. He's been charged with burglary and witness intimidation." "Will I need to testify?" I asked. "Probably not. He's pleading guilty. The evidence is overwhelming. But it's another piece of the puzzle. Another person held accountable." I thanked him and hung up. Accountability. That word kept coming up. It's what I'd fought for, what I'd risked my safety for. And slowly, piece by piece, person by person, the system was delivering it. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fast. But it was something. In August, almost a year after Bailey had dug up that hole, I drove past my old neighborhood. I hadn't been back since I'd moved. Kellerman's house was for sale, a bank foreclosure. The new sod in the backyard had died, leaving a brown patch of dirt where $3 million had been buried. The house looked smaller than I remembered, more ordinary. It was hard to believe that so much money, so much history, so much crime had been hidden there. I drove away and didn't look back. I'd already decided not to buy anything with the reward money beyond the new house. The rest was sitting in a savings account, collecting interest. I'd told Agent Reinhardt I might donate some of it to organizations that helped victims of organized crime. That would be a good use for it, he'd said. I was still thinking about it, still deciding what felt right. But I had time. For the first time in a year, I wasn't in a hurry. Wasn't looking over my shoulder. Wasn't waiting for the next threat, the next revelation, the next crisis. I was just living, working, walking my dog, being boring and normal and irrelevant. It was exactly what I wanted. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd listened to Kellerman that first day. If I'd taken Bailey home, fixed the fence, and never said anything. Would I have been safer? Probably. Would I have slept better? Maybe. But I also would have known the truth and done nothing. I would have let a criminal keep $3 million stolen from victims who'd never been made whole. I would have been complicit. I couldn't live with that. I'm not a hero. I'm not even particularly brave. I was terrified through most of this. But I made a choice. And I'd make it again. The truth matters. Justice matters. Even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous. Even when it costs you. In September, on the anniversary of the day Bailey dug up that hole, I took her to her favorite hiking trail in the Columbia River Gorge. We walked for hours, just the two of us, surrounded by trees and waterfalls and the kind of natural beauty that makes you remember why the Pacific Northwest is worth all the rain. At one point, we stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the river. Bailey sat beside me, panting happily, tail wagging. I thought about everything that had happened in the past year. The fear, the FBI investigations, the threats, the trial, the reward, the new life. And I thought about how none of it would have happened if this dog hadn't been curious and enthusiastic and determined to dig where she wasn't supposed to. "You're a good dog," I told her, scratching behind her ears. "Even when you cause chaos." She licked my hand and wagged her tail harder. We stayed there for a while, watching the river flow, before heading back down the trail. The sun was setting by the time we got to the car, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I drove home to my new house in my new neighborhood, where nobody knew my story and nobody cared. Bailey fell asleep in the passenger seat, exhausted from the hike. And for the first time in a year, I felt completely at peace. Justice had been served. The guilty had been punished. The victims had been compensated, at least partially. The money had been recovered. And I'd survived. That was enough. That was everything. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.